The Monster Association cadres versus Season 1's monsters, and when we say Season 1, we're talking about the dragon level threats. This is something that I'm sure a lot of people are curious to know. Have you ever wondered how would One Punch Man's introduction monsters fare against the current ones, especially those who were defeated by Saitama like Vaccine Man, Maroguri, and Carnage Kabuto? Do these guys have what it takes to compete with the Monster Association? Let's say for the sake of the arguments that Season 1's monsters create an organization. Dr. Genus, Fukageo, and the Dark Matter Thieves decide to merge their armies, knowledge, and combatants together, all to defy the Monster Association. This would result in a team-up of 9 dragon-level threats: Vaccine Man, Beefcake, Carnage Kabuto, Melzagard, Gyuganshu, Gloribus, Pluton, the ship, and the city's East Meteor. Don't ask me how they attained that, they just did. This team-up will also contain demon and tiger-level monsters, mainly through the House of Evolution and the Dark Matter Thieves army. We'll also have other demons like the Subterranean, Sky, and Deep Sea Kings and Combo Infinity, mainly joining every single monster we've seen in the first season to take out the monsters we've seen in the third. This would also be interesting since we technically have rival scientists like Dr. Genus and Psychos. Both of them explained how monsters and heroes get their strength. One explained the limiter and the other explained the near-death evolution. Pretty cool stuff if you ask me, but how would this go and which monsters would come up on top? Season 1's monsters are pretty hard to scale, mainly due to the reason that the scaling wasn't really established in first chapters, and we sadly never had any additional information about how strong they are in the future of the story. Vaccine Man and Beefcake sadly faced a bitter fate, getting killed by Saitama, and follow this up with Carnage Kabuto, who also got destroyed by the same guy. But you can somehow scale the 3 of them to each other if you rely on the data book. Specifically in Carnage Kabuto's section, it does say that in a physical sense, he is incomparably higher than any monster we've seen so far, which should put him above Maroguri and Vaccine Man in terms of physical strength. I personally don't subscribe to the idea that this is only talking about Carnage Kabuto in his base, as first description of any character in the databook talks generally about the character as a whole. Boros' first description in the anime guidebook says that he can destroy the planet just next to the picture of his armored state. This isn't saying that he can do it in his armored state, it's talking about what he's capable of doing in general, so this is definitely counting for his Ashura mode. But this could also be talking only about the House of Evolution monsters, as this actually rhymes narratively with what Dr. Genus has been saying, the strongest of the House of Evolution. But the more I look into this, the more I'm convinced it's talking about every single monster. You see, the databook has sections. It talks about heroes, criminals, and monsters. The first monster displayed in that book was Vaccine Man, and the last in that exact section was Kabuto. It's exactly where they say he is considered the strongest. If it was a section that only contains the House of Evolution monsters, I would have taken that context and believed it was only referring to them. But the French translation of this also has the word aperçu, which indicates that it's talking about the monsters we've seen so far in the databook, which is a similar wording to the Japanese version koremadino, which means that came before. So it does suggest that Carnage Kabuto is physically stronger than Vaccine Man and Maroguri. But why is this very important? You see, Darkshine in the audiobooks defeated Carnage Kabuto, which paints the idea that Darkshine is stronger than Maroguri and Vaccine Man. The only problem I have with this is, can we really trust Genos' estimation of Carnage Mode's Kabuto's powers? I mean, think about it this way. All the monsters Genos summoned in the VGS, he has personally experienced and fought. He almost died against Mosquito Girl and fought against the Deep Sea King's hydrated and dehydrated form, so his estimation should be close to correct regarding these monsters. But against Carnage Kabuto, he fought him in base, never in his Carnage mode. So how did he test his strength? I guess it could be justified by saying that Genos doesn't really estimate energy when the monster is static, but would be able to when some sort of attack is performed. He reads the energy of that said attack and correlates it to the strength of that character. Against Goketsu, he estimated he's that strong after he took a punch which weirdly didn't decimate him. And with Psycho Orochi, it was until she used her beam that he was able to detect how strong she is. So this This in a sense explains it. When Carnage Kabuto was attacking Saitama, he was using his full power. He understood prior that he's facing someone his instinctive senses warned him not to fight, which means the Carnage mode Kabuto we've seen in the VGS should be as strong as the real one, as Genos was able to pick up his energy levels when he faced Saitama. One on the other hand would question the validity of the audiobook and wonder if it's canon in the first place. Zombie Man, after he defeated Pure Blood, stated that it's been a while since he fought a monster this strong, but he did fight Carnage Kabuto in the VGS just days ago according to the timeline. You can simply justify this by saying that Zombie Man doesn't consider training in the VGS a real fight, so there's that. The overall point is, Darkshine fought Carnage mode Kabuto, defeated him in 15 minutes, so he did defeat a monster with physical strength far above that of Beefcakes and Vaccine Mans. But what if this statement doesn't suggest all monsters we've seen in the series, but it actually aims towards the House of Evolution monsters? On that note, multiple things can be said about these two monsters. You can, on the other hand, try to upscale Vaccine Man by using this statement: the largest monster ever recorded in City A. The Hero Association is aware that Elder Centipede exists at this point, and they still deem this title for Vaccine Man. The major issue with this is that Elder Centipede isn't confirmed to have attacked City A. It could be any other city, maybe Z City, as that's potentially how he was recruited after by the Monster Association. So until we got a confirmation that it was City A, Vaccine Man shouldn't be considered above Elder Centipede. The Hero Association executives were also so afraid to the point of considering calling out Tatsumaki, but everybody should understand that at this point of the story, the quality of the monsters they encountered so far on a regular basis were only demons. So seeing this monster that can perform this much of destructiveness is new to them, hence that's why it's perfectly logical they considered calling out their strongest weapon. Even the Hero Association isn't really aware of how strong their heroes are. There's a scene in season 1 where a staff member questions if Tatsumaki could have handled the scale of an attack that wasn't really that impressive. Even Tatsumaki says, "Bro, pack it up, you're stupid." But I guess the point is, the Hero Association is still green. They still don't accurately power scale, same as us viewers who has the advantage of seeing everything on screen. You can also make an argument and say that Carnage Kabuto is only stronger than Vaccine Man physically, but the spherical bombs isn't accounted for in that equation. The problem with this is that we literally witnessed Vaccine Man tank his own strongest attack we've seen on screen. If he can manage to do this, a physically stronger opponent can too. Now, when it comes to Beefcake, he is considered to be fairly strong by the community for mainly two reasons. One, he wiped out a city with a hand swift, something that nobody has done in the entire series, and two, his face didn't explode when Saitama punched him. We start with the first one. Now, I'm not about to argue that this isn't impressive, this is actually insane. Even the hole he made inverse scaling wise is something crazy for a dragon level monster. People downplay this by saying stuff like, this attack if cacked is city level and many characters have performed things that are much stronger. But we all need to understand this, and I'm gonna hammer this for the rest of this video. Authors, when they illustrate their series, they don't account for you to measure and calc the attack. They know that the average viewers aren't efficient when it comes to physics. So the best way for them to display how destructive a character is to simply draw how much they destroy. They're definitely not counting on every fan to calc this in order to say, okay, this character is strong. It's just the way we do it when it comes to outverse scaling to essentially make crossover battles fair. When it's inverse scaling, you simply compare the destructiveness of said attacks. This happened multiple times. Goketsu uses his fist against Bakuzan and scares him off. You don't think this was written and drawn to show how strong Goketsu's casual attacks are on a narrative standpoint? If we abide by real-life physics and math, this attack isn't even as strong as Suiryu splitting the clouds, but on a narrative standpoint, it definitely is. The reason we have stuff like Suiryu splitting the clouds is simply because it's cool, definitely not because the author expects you to understand the science behind it and calculate it to upscale other characters. Again, we do it and it's completely fair when we power scale characters outside of their verse, but not inside. The point is, and this is a hill I'd die on, this attack on a narrative standpoint is insane, and there aren't many characters that can replicate this type of destructiveness. This might be a hot take for a lot of people, but if you can bring me characters other than those who are narratively considered top tier dragons without using calcs and not just seeing it on screen, I would be happy to accept it. Now, the second argument is easy to brush off. The easy answer is that no one can really estimate how strong Saitama's normal punches are. This punch can be as strong as the one he took out Goketsu with or far inferior. Beefcake having his face still intact isn't really really a feat you can use. Saitama's normal punches vary from one to another, and I'm pretty sure that he could have destroyed him with a normal punch. Now, the best way to scale these two characters is to have two metas. One where they're weaker than Carnage Kabuto, which by extension weaker than Super Aloe Darkshine, and two, these characters are not weaker than Carnage Kabuto, as that statement was only meant for the House of Evolution monsters, and they are as strong as their destructive attack presented them to be. With that being said, we can move on to the remaining monsters. The Dark Matter Thieves are also victims of early scaling, where the authors arguably still didn't establish how strong dragons should be. Reasons I'm saying this is because you think the dominator of an entire universe should have strong combatants as his commanders or generals, but sadly enough, Melzgard is a regen merchant that gets dodged and damaged by early on Eion. Not really a good look. But strictly speaking, this is only when looking at this on a surface level. Now hear me out, Melzgard does have a huge weakness. Destroy his marbles and you can definitely destroy him. Not really that complicated of a solution. But what many people fail to account for is that it's actually extremely hard to find out that weakness. I used to say that since Metalbat, not that bright of a guy, can figure it out, many would, but that's only when disregarding the context. The only reason Metalbat was able to do that is because Melzgard tried to send a tiny version of himself to contact the ship asking them if the cannons are ready. If he didn't do that, he arguably would have hidden it successfully the majority of the fight. Reasons I'm saying this is because Atomic Samurai used the Atomic Slash and still couldn't hit the last marble. Melzgard is also confident he would survive the bombardment of the ship, where the story is clearly indicating that the heroes were cooked if Tatsumaki didn't save them, which means Melzgard would have hidden the marbles for such a large-scale attack. But on a physical standpoint, he isn't really that much. The dude gets stopped by Puri Puri Prisoner. The point of all of this, Melzgard is built for a battle of attrition. He outlasts his opponents with his regen and finishes them off, makes them huff and puff same way he dealt with Eion. This is kinda like a stronger zombie man with a weakness to his regen ability. When it comes to Giryu Gunshoop, I've heard it all. Giryu Gunshoop stronger than Tatsumaki because he can throw rebels better than her, and Tatsumaki is stronger than the Gamma Ray Burst because Saitama is impressed by her and not that attack. Bro, pack it up, buddy. But in all seriousness, the argument people put for these characters is to have them above the ship's durability, for various reasons like wanting to fight Saitama after he destroyed a percentage of it, and the ship is hard to damage from the outside by characters like Tatsumaki, which indicates that these two guys are strong. Somehow of a valid argument, but for these characters, for me, it's the case of I needed to see more. Personally speaking, these characters scale to Melzgard at best, and Melzgard isn't really that impressive. The fact remains that they're just victims of early on scaling. Alright, moving on to a ship, and having a ship as a character isn't really that insane. A bunch of other monsters are controlling it by the end of the day. Now in the anime, just by seeing the ship, the staff members were like, okay, this is obviously a dragon, no, this could be God. It's actually insane that Murata in a stream implied that Tatsumaki cannot bring the ship down, or at the very least, it's gonna take her a considerable amount of energy. Tatsumaki in character isn't someone who's patient. If it was that easy, she would have done it already. There's no hostage or anything of that sort. This is the same character that suggested to flip the entire Z city to destroy the Monster Association hideout. But the ship, oh no, it requires a lot more. Not to mention that it would not fall until the power sphere is destroyed, which is linked to Boros himself. So in a way, you'd need to kill Boros first, and buddy, good luck with that. The point is, this ship, if not for Saitama, would have been super hard to bring down. Now the City Z meteor scaling is super straightforward. It has the destructive capacity to destroy Z City, which is as large as a country, and dragging other cities to be partially destroyed. If you are a character that can destroy this, you'd be the strongest monster someone like Silverfang has ever seen. Metal Knight and Genos tried their absolute best with its destructive power and didn't make a dent. But anyways, this meteor is insanely destructive. The last character we have is Pluton, who's an only anime exclusive monster. I don't actually consider him to be canon since he did this much damage to City Y, and the story doesn't mention a thing about it in the future. But bro, look at this damage. It seems like he was destroying the city the more he walked. He's huge, but he's actually slow. That's everything we know about the monster. Alright, look, I just needed to fill space to match the monsters, so deal with it. But anyways, can these monsters accomplish anything if they team up against the Monster Association? Alright, so we've talked about the Monster Association cadres a lot in this channel. I just made a ranking video for them recently, so doing another full breakdown would just make the video unnecessarily long. Instead, I think it makes more sense to start comparing them to some of the major monsters from Season 1. Let's take Carnage Kabuto. The reason I keep bringing up and hammering the idea that Darkshine beat him up in 15 minutes is simply because it helps us position Kabuto's strength in comparison to the Monster Association. We've seen Darkshine completely no-cell Black S and easily defeat evil natural water. So Carnage Kabuto being able to fight someone like this for a full 15 minutes means their strength is in the same ballpark. The fight wasn't close mainly because Darkshine's durability far outpaces his attack potency. He's even said himself that he doesn't know how to hurt his own body. So in that 15-minute bout, they were both landing hits, but over time only Carnage Kabuto was taking real damage. Their attack potency was comparable, but their durability wasn't. If Carnage Kabuto is relative to Darkshine in strength, that certainly means he'd be able to shatter evil natural water and wipe out countless Black S's clones. Now, I'm not sure if Black S would say that he would never be able to hurt Carnage Kabuto the same way he said it against Darkshine, since Kabuto doesn't really have the aforementioned character's durability, but remember that Darkshine wasn't even actively defending. Black S would probably need to start merging to seriously hurt a juggernaut that was able to take blows from Darkshine for 15 minutes. And honestly speaking, being able to fight Darkshine like that should easily put you above monsters like Neon, Gums, and Fur Ugly, who simply are just not on the same page as Darkshine or by extension Carnage Kabuto. With that being said, if we're talking about Vomited Fur Ugly, the one who powered up exponentially, that's a completely different story. Now, Vomited Fur Ugly was able to match Darkshine in both speed and strength, and more importantly, he did bypass Darkshine's durability. He was able to do it with his acid, not his physical strength, but even if you argue that Carnage Kabuto's 15-minute clash with Darkshine was impressive, there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that Ugly's acid wouldn't also be able to melt Kabuto's skin. If it worked on Darkshine, it would certainly work on a character who couldn't injure Darkshine in the first place, which means, logically speaking, Carnage Kabuto's run ends here. Now, Homeless Emperor from a distance should also be able to dismantle Carnage Kabuto in much the same fashion he did with Fur Ugly, as the latter does operate on a similar strength level. And speaking of Homeless Emperor, we should definitely talk about Vaccine Man. According to a statement from Murata, they both possess essentially the same power. Now, if we take the first interpretation that the databook on Carnage Kabuto's section was referring to all monsters in general at that point of the story, since Kabuto is weaker than Vomited Fur Ugly and Homeless Emperor, then that means Vaccine Man is also weaker than Homeless Emperor. This would prove that even if two characters share the same type of power, their actual output and destructive yield can be vastly different. Homeless Emperor's energy bombs were powerful enough to defeat Vomited Ugly, who is relative or above Carnage Kabuto in strength, who in turn is physically superior to Vaccine Man. That's a straightforward scaling chain. However, if you go by the other interpretation, that the databook was only referring to the House of Evolution monsters, then this equation falls apart, and Vaccine Man's true power level becomes much more speculative. If we just compare their feats and application of power, Homeless Emperor is clearly on another level. He unleashed far more attacks, controlled them precisely, and caused destruction on a much larger scale. Yes, the authors said they have the same powers, but remember that Chose was included in these same statements, and Chose only managed to produce a single energy orb, which was countered by Suiryu. This just goes to show that even with having the same microphone, not everyone has the same voice. It's also possible that Vaccine Man could be just as destructive as Homeless Emperor. The simple fact remains that we simply didn't see it on screen because Saitama ended him quickly. But based on what we know, Homeless Emperor's bombs are superior in output and scale. With that being said, Vaccine Man has one big advantage. He does possess physical strength. We've seen him on screen tank his own explosions. In the bonus chapter of Volume 15, he was casually walking through his own blast while ignoring attacks from other heroes. Heck, he didn't even know they were there in the first place. So if these two started spamming energy bombs at each other, Vaccine Man might survive the collateral damage long enough to outlast Homeless Emperor, who has absolutely no durability. We also have no proof that Vaccine Man couldn't withstand Homeless Emperor's bombs the same way he tanks his own, especially if we consider his transformed state, as it literally says in the databook that he gets considerable power. But anyways, it's very important to remember that at the end of the day, this is all speculative, but coming with these scenarios is also plausible. At the very least, I can see Vaccine Man using his ability to fly to control the battlefield. He could hover out of reach, bombarding ground-based monsters like Fur Ugly, Gums, or Evil Natural Water from a safe distance. Sure, some characters can jump high, but how exactly high? Vaccine Man could stay airborne where they simply cannot touch him. Alright, when it comes to Beefcake, he is similar to Vaccine Man, but with one major exception. His destructive capacity is completely insane.
Let me tell you something else, man.
This character is going to make a belt out of Elder Centipede and bury Golden as so deep you'd need a mining crew to dig him out. In all seriousness, even though it's tough to definitively scale his overall strength, his best feat is arguably one of the most devastating displays of raw power in the entire series. At the very least, I'm confident enough that he'd be able to plow through armies of Black-S clones with a few casual swipes, and even if he went down, he'd definitely take thousands with him. Now, here's my purely speculative take. If we assume his physical stats go hand to hand with his destructive scale, I'd comfortably rank him as a high dragon. Monsters like Gums, Neon, Fur Ugly, or Evil Natural Water just wouldn't stand a chance. I can even see him go toe-to-toe with Elder Centipede. Narratively speaking, or lore-wise, Elder Centipede does have solid arguments for being an extraordinary, exceptionally strong dragon, while Beefcake at the end of the day is just vibes. With that being said, someone like Homeless Emperor could probably take him down from a distance with a sustained energy barrage, but on an open field, Beefcake's casual destructive power would be a nightmare to be dealt with, especially since Homeless Emperor can be killed by a gust of wind. Now, when it comes to the Dark Matter Thieves, their portrayal unfortunately just screams low dragon. I know there are different interpretations out there, but based on feats alone, I don't find them all that impressive. These guys are criminally underrated for sure, and narratively they're meant to be a huge threat, but since this was early on in the series, their actual feats aren't really impressive. If we look at this from a 1v1 standpoint, sure, it'd be very difficult to figure out Malzgard's weakness, but let's say a spade is a spade, and let's be real. Even if a cadre couldn't really figure out that weakness, Malzgard's strength isn't anything special. The guy couldn't even hurt base Silver Fang with what looked like a fully charged attack, and this was base Bang, not Awakening Breath. Base Silver Fang, without using his martial arts, specifically the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist, isn't portrayed as a physical powerhouse. He's skilled, and that's why he's feared, not because he's that physically strong. So the fact that Malzgard couldn't put him down says a lot. If you want to get hyper technical about this, just compare how Bang's attacks affected Malzgard versus how they affected Fur Ugly. Silver Fang hit Malzgard 6 times, as the shockwaves indicates, and he was able to send him flying a huge distance away. Murata chose this funky animation in the tonary jump site to show you how much that damaged him, in comparison to against Ugly Fur, who hit him like 7 times and didn't send him flying. He kinda just pushed him back a little. Both absolutely did considerable damage, but against Malzgard, not only did it do more, but also made the alien consider using the cannons as he started to understand that this is way beyond his pay grade. So at the end of the day, I don't see Malzgard as particularly impressive. He doesn't hold up against the upper tier cadres, and for me, he's firmly stuck in that low to mid dragon range at best. Now let's talk about Giryu Ganshu. He could be stronger than Malzgard, but all he really does is throw some rocks. You could argue he's supposed to be impressive since Boros gets hyped up after Saitama beats him. There's absolutely nothing to suggest he's on the same level as a character like Psychos. Yes, he claims to be the strongest psychic in the universe, but the authors themselves treat this line as a joke. And personally speaking, I don't buy that his attacks are stronger than their ship's durability. As for Glory Boss, he might be the most featless monster in the entire series. All we know is that he's ranked above the other 2 generals, and if we're being completely generous, maybe his acid is on par with Fur Ugly's. As far as we're concerned, these 3 are low cadre level at best until we get nuances maybe in the future. And honestly, Pluton with just that 1 feat already looks much more impressive. This alone puts him comfortably in mid cadre territory in my opinion. Now, if the invasion happens with all of Season 1's monsters on Boros' ship and they use the meteor to attack Z City, and if Saitama doesn't interfere, the Monster Association would need to act, because the hideout is located in City Z. And narratively speaking, there are only 2 characters or monsters that can stop this kind of attack, either Orochi or Goketsu, and maybe Psychos if she powers up for scaling above Goketsu. Goketsu's argument gets the right from Genos' estimation. Genos sees him stronger than anything Saitama has done up to that point, as he thinks Goketsu's defeat requires a team of not only the S-class heroes but his master too, which essentially means he believes Goketsu can destroy Z-City's meteor. And the case for Orochi is simple, he does scale above Goketsu even when he's suppressed, so Goketsu jumps and destroys this meteor and the ship after appears. Season 1's monsters jump and land on the surface, and Girogiro retaliates by calling the Cadres. A lot of things can happen. I can see Pluton and Maroguri deleting armies of Black S, Ashura mode Kabuto destroying Fur Ugly, Melzagard handling evil natural water, and Homeless Emperor gets in a fight against Vaccine Man. We also have a fight between No Eyes monsters and the ship starts bombarding Elder Centipede. Pretty cool concept and a very competitive fight for now. But what happens when Goketsu and Rover starts making moves and waves? Nobody really in the battlefield has their kind of scaling. Beefcake is crazy for making a hole in the city, but Goketsu is portrayed to being above the meteor that destroyed the entire city. Beefcake doesn't explode from Saitama's punch, which is impressive, but Rover takes a punch that impresses Orochi and doesn't fall down. And if these are not enough, Black S transforms to Platinum S. He starts killing monsters the same way Garou did to save Silver Fang. But in all seriousness, there isn't any monster that scales to these three and they will destroy them with no difficulties. Even when talking about the demons and tigers, the Monster Association has Bug God, Roy Ripper, Phoenix Man, and G5, monsters far stronger than Season 1's strongest demons, and if you wanna know more about that type of scaling, make sure to check this video. However, the Monster Association would still surprisingly lose the battle, simply because now they need to deal with the ship, and in order for the ship to fall, Boros must be defeated. Okay.